Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman.
I'm Howie Sobiger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Welcome to the program, and I appreciate you being here. You could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the talk is always fun and the chat is always lively. Of course, you could call in North America. The number to call is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-6500-151. Love for you to be part of the show, so feel free to call in, be part of the show, and be part of the political hitman experience right here on Israel News Talk Radio. So it's a big week. A little later on today, Joe Biden will be inaugurated as the 46th president of the United States. It is a day that, to me, is a little I don't know. It's a little bittersweet, I guess. At one point, I have mixed feelings about what's going on. Firstly, I like the democratic process, so I have no problem with the democratic process. And if Joe Biden won the presidency, I have no problem wishing him congratulations on winning the presidency and hoping that his presidency will be a successful one. At the same time, I'm watching as the American government cracks down on conservative people, and as big tech cracks down on conservative people. So, on the one hand, I could see the change of power, and look, power changes back and forth when it comes to the presidency. Sometimes it's Republican, sometimes it's Democratic. At the end of the day, there's not really much of a change. People can't really change things all that much in the 4 years they're there, substantially, but it's okay. But this crackdown on conservatism and the fascism that we are seeing from big tech and the Democratic Party is something we should all be scared of. I want to talk a little bit about that and a whole lot more right here on Political Hitman. Feel free to join me in the chat room, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could call in. The numbers to call in North America is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-6500-151. I'm Howie Sobiger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Political Hitman.
I'm Howie Sobiger, your political hitman. Join me in the chat room at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation is always interesting and fun. Join me in the chat room. And, of course, you could call in. The show is live, so feel free to call in. The numbers can be found on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Now, every year in September, I start my grade 7, 8, and 9 history classes the same way. I explain that history is written by the winners, and the losers really have no say in how they are depicted in the narrative. I explain that history is not truth. The story is written by the partisan people who are trying to appease the current rulers. I point out that too often in history, the other side stories get lost, and as a result, our perception of the world is altered by the lack of perspective. They usually look at me like I'm crazy. And then I ask them to explain to me the point of view of, let's say, Chief Pontiac, or of Jefferson Davis, of countless other people whose stories are interesting, their efforts and determination outstanding, but their cause lost and their effect relegated to being depicted however the victors choose. Take the American Civil War, for example. We are so often told that the Confederates were racists who wanted to ensure centuries more of slavery because of their extreme hatred of the black population. This is a modern-day rewriting of history. Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States during the Civil War, himself declared that the war was about taxation, not about slavery. In 1861, Congress passed the Morrill Tariff Act, which imposed a 40% federal tax on imports to southern states. The southern states balked at paying the northern states 40% tax, claiming that the expense would put their plantations into bankruptcy. The U.S. government felt that the money made by the plantations of the South could help benefit the entire country, and imposing a tax was a way to equalize and redistribute the wealth. The South would not entertain the idea. In a message to the U.S. Congress penned on July 4th, 1861, Lincoln states, quote, "My policy sought only to collect the revenue." He reiterated that the assertion that taxation, not slavery, caused the Civil War. In his inaugural address on March 4th, 1861, he said, and this is another quote, "I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so." In his Emancipation Proclamation, where Lincoln freed all the slaves in the U.S., Lincoln did not even allude to the Civil War as a catalyst for emancipation, and he didn't free all the slaves. Lincoln's two proclamations exempted 1 million slaves under his control from being freed. Lincoln offered the southern states 3 months to return to the Union and pay 40% tax, and told them that they could keep their slaves. The southern states refused, and then Lincoln issued a war order as, quote, "fit and necessary war measure for suppressing said tax rebellion." He actually wrote that, and he said that. Now, you got to remember that whites, blacks, Hispanics, Jews, Protestants, Catholics, Indians, they proudly served in the Confederate Army and received pensions from the southern states. But today, because of a rewriting of history, the Confederate flag and all things Confederate are considered racist pro-slavery symbols. The perception that the Confederacy was a racist band of slave owners fighting to keep their slaves was an intentional propaganda campaign organized by the Union to crush the remaining rebellious thoughts in the southern states during the Reconstruction period. So much akin to the campaign by the British, who depicted Napoleon as a short, fat, hand-in-a-tunic, incompetent slob, when in fact he was a tall, skinny, capable general. We are seeing the same thing happen today. So don't be fooled by this. We are seeing the exact same thing happen today. The past 4 years, we've seen the propaganda campaign against the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. At least he's president for the next few hours. Now, he's been depicted by the media as a boorish slob with limited mental capacity. The fact is, he is a billionaire business owner. He's never gotten, but that's never gotten in the way of a good smear propaganda campaign, has it? The facts never get in the way. The campaign continued relentlessly, hindering the president from doing his job, investigation after investigation, each one searching for some shred of evidence that could destroy the presidency. 3 failed impeachment charges, then a series of successful impeachment charges based on a vague, innocuous conversation between 2 world leaders. A special prosecutor, which, by the way, is a political ploy. They're appointed by the opposing team to derail presidents. You saw it with Clinton, and now you saw it with Trump to derail presidencies. They're used by both Republicans and Democrats for the same thing, to harass the president. Investigating claims made in a proven campaign disinformation booklet that was prepared by the opposing team. So, we talked about the Steele dossier. It was a propaganda booklet that was prepared that they used as the basis for impeaching the president. And then there was a cherry on the cake about 2 weeks ago. There was a coup d'etat, an attempted insurgence, as they say, an attempted insurrection, an attempted overthrowing of the government. That wasn't really a coup d'etat, an insurrection, an overthrowing of the government. A second impeachment. And over 24 hours, the president was impeached. No trial, no discussion, no witnesses. Just impeach the man. A week before he was leaving office anyway. So they impeached him. Congress impeached him. And then the moral chest thumping of the opposing side, who now felt that they had the authority to condemn the president and label all his supporters racist Nazis. And I'm not making this up. On CNN, Don Lemon on CNN, and he's an international guy. He's a presenter on CNN, and he presents right across the world. On CNN, Don Lemon called the president and all of his supporters white supremacists and Nazis. White supremacists and Nazis. 75 million people who voted for Trump, he called white supremacists and Nazis. This is how far the dialogue has dropped when it comes to political discussion in the United States. Much like the misinformation propaganda spewed after the Civil War, Democrats today are trying to do the same to Trump and his supporters. History will again be rewritten by the winners. Those on the losing side, no matter how successful or well-intentioned, will all be tarred with the same brush. It's quite sad, if you ask me, how history hasn't taught anything to the population. And that the next generation will take this lesson in history, that we could take a story and we could rewrite the story, and we could do whatever we want and say whatever we want, and everyone will believe us because we're writing the history books. The history books aren't writing us, and be able to do this to the legacy of a man and 75 million people, to just label them Nazis. It is actually revolting that this has happened, and it's revolting that social media, Facebook, Twitter. I've closed my Twitter account over this. That Facebook and Twitter could just lock out people that they don't agree with politically. The concept of freedom of speech has long disappeared, but now suppression of speech has begun. And it's not only in the States. I mean, it starts in the States. It's going to spread everywhere else. Power corrupts, and ultimate power corrupts ultimately, right? That's the saying. And so when you have this power that you could shut down people's speech, that you could stop people from expressing themselves, and you have this power and you use this power to actually do that. It's normally done in fascist governments. It's normally done in fascist states and in third world states and banana republics. So if you actually use your power to do this, to suppress other people from expressing their opinion, then you are essentially becoming a fascist. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the fascism of social media. There are monopolies. There are huge companies. They control all the information in the world between Google and Amazon and Facebook. Almost 100% of the information in the world is being passed on from them. And so when they decide to shut down one side and to shut down debate and discussion, then we know we are in serious, serious trouble. And that is where we are at right now. They have banned the president of the United States from posting on their social media platforms. How sad and scary is that? Now, of course, they're going to argue that the president of the United States organized this insurrection, or that they call it, this riot that happened at the Capitol building. Even though facts don't really point that direction, facts point to the fact that this riot started before the president spoke. Facts point that there were bombs placed in different places, like the Republican National Headquarters and the Democratic National Headquarters, and those were placed way before the president got up to speak. And so the president's speech did not spontaneously erupt a group of people to go and attack the Capitol, as they told us originally that was it. When that story didn't make sense, by the way, they changed the story. So now it was all the president's rhetoric from the beginning of his presidency that built up to this moment. So you see, when the truth doesn't fit the narrative, the winners try to change the narrative to fit the truth. So who do you believe these days? You can't really believe anyone, can you? It's kind of a scary situation when you think about it, that the politicians, and this could happen in any country. It's happening in the United States right now, but it could happen anywhere. That the politicians that are talking to you are telling you lies. They're manipulating you. They're controlling you through media, and you're buying into it. I'm Howie Silvergard. This is Political Hitman. Feel free to call me in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 02-650-0151. We'll be right back right after this.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Simento from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together, we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Simento, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman.
I'm Howie Silvergard, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation is always going. You can call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 02-650-0151. I would like to address something that's in the chat room right now. One of the posters in the chat room says, you're equivocating Lincoln's moderation vis-a-vis slavery with the war not being about slavery. These are not the same. Yes, Lincoln was not a staunch abolitionist at the time, but the South held the Union and fought to protect the slavery. The belief that the Civil War wasn't about slavery is a result of very well-organized campaigns by the Southern states who wanted to protect their reputation after losing the war and their slaves. It's a bit ironic to see one of the most prominent examples of the losers writing history, the narrative that the Civil War was about state rights and not about slavery, when trying to show the winners write history. I wasn't using that narrative. I was using the words of Lincoln. So the President of the United States, the President of the Union, wrote very clearly to Congress and said very clearly in his inaugural address that the Civil War was not about slavery. So we could argue it all you want, but when the Union, I'm not talking about the Confederacy, so the Confederacy could write whatever they want and they could say whatever they want. They were the losers. But when the Union is writing the history, when the President of the United States is writing the history on behalf of the Union, I have to kind of believe Lincoln over any, like, look, we live in the 21st century. Over the course of the 20th century, we saw a lot of slavery. Reconstruction created a lot of slavery. It created slavery and it created a lot of oppression of the minority black community in the United States. And so the narrative slowly changed over the years. But if I trust Lincoln and the President of the Union, who was president at the time of the Civil War, if I trust what he's told his Congress, that the Civil War was not about slavery, but was more about taxation, I have to believe Lincoln. I'm sorry. I just have to believe him. I wasn't there, so I have to believe people who were there. Lincoln was there. So anyway, I'm not going to get into this argument. That's not what I'm talking about tonight. So, but there you go. There you go. That's the problem with rewriting history, by the way. That when the truth comes out and when people talk about the truth, there's always somebody out there saying, hey, you're a liar. That's not what happened. For instance, when we talk about President Trump's speech on the day of the riot and how the speech did not encourage people to jump out and attack Congress. When we talk about that speech, where President Trump said, now let's march to Congress peacefully and patriotically. That's the exact quote from his speech. Peacefully and patriotically doesn't mean break down the doors and destroy the building. When I ask people to look at the speech and to tell me where in the speech Trump called for violence, nobody's been able to do it because it doesn't exist. But then again, when we rewrite history, then everything exists. Everything is accurate. I mean, come on. We heard for 4 years that Trump was a Russian spy. That wasn't true either. But that will go down in history as something that's true because, once again, the winners write history. Now, Joe Biden is taking over as president of the United States. Joe Biden has a long history of of lying, of plagiarism, of telling mistruths. So let's see how well Joe Biden does in telling the truth. Joe Biden also has a long history of not liking the state of Israel. We saw Joe Biden not like the state of Israel over the course of years when he was in the Senate. The pinnacle of his Israel hating time was actually in 1982, on June 22nd in 1982. Now, this is a very famous thing. Everyone, I think anybody who supports Israel, who's been following Israel and the Israel fight, has seen this before, has seen this quote before. But on June 22nd, 1982, Joe Biden was a senator from Delaware, and he confronted then Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin during his Senate Foreign Relations Committee testimony. He threatened to cut off aid to Israel. Now, we hear America doing that, cutting off aid to Israel and threatening to cut off aid to Israel, so Israel will bow and do what they want. Yitzhak Shamir bowed and did what they want during the Gulf War. We saw Yitzhak Rabin bowed and did what they want. And it was all over billions of dollars worth of aid or billions of dollars worth of loan guarantees. And Israel bows to the United States when the money is threatened. Even though one of the foreign ministers of the state of Israel told me directly that Israel's GDP is large enough, they don't have to rely on American money, but they still rely on America for certain things, and they bow sometimes when America says bow. But here, Israel was run by Menachem Begin, and Menachem Begin answered, "Don't threaten us with cutting off your aid. It won't work. I'm not a Jew with trembling knees." So that is the direct quote from Menachem Begin. The rest of this quote came from another senator that was in the room who claims Begin said this. There's no recording of Begin saying this, but it is so great I have to share it anyway. Begin continues, "I am a proud Jew with 3,700 years of civilized history. Nobody came to our aid when we were dying in the gas chambers and ovens. Nobody came to our aid when we were striving to create our country. We paid for it. We fought for it. We died for it. We will stand by our principles. We will defend them. And when necessary, we will die for them again, with or without your aid." So, there is a strong leader. There is a statement from a strong leader. I wish we had leaders like Menachem Begin today. I wish we had leaders that weren't jellyfish, that had spines, that were able to stand up and defend both themselves, their country, and had that fortitude to defend themselves. They had a leader like that in the United States. His name was Donald Trump. He was not afraid of anybody. He stood up and he defended the country. He said, "America first." And he was lambasted for it. And he was raked over the coals for it. And his presidency was essentially ruined because he believed in what he was doing. He believed and he stood up for what he cared for and what he believed in. And he did not fit in with the mealy-mouthed, jellyfish politicians that run the United States government. And so they out-politicianed him. That's what happened there. It's not that they were smarter than him. It's not that he was a bad guy, that he was doing bad things. In fact, the stuff he did in America was great. But what happened was they out-politicianed him. Donald Trump is not a politician. And they were outmaneuvered him. They knew the rules better than he did. Some of these politicians have been in Congress for 50 years. They know how to play the game much better than Trump knew how to play the game. And so at the end of the day, Trump got outmaneuvered by them, and his presidency essentially got destroyed by them. He lost the second presidency because they played the game better than he did. And that's the way politics works. I mean, you look at Israel, Benny Gantz is actually feeling the same thing with Bibi Netanyahu. He played the game, and he lost the game. Bibi played it much better than he did. So when politicians play the games better, other politicians lose, and that's the way it works. And so when the politician loses, and he wasn't so popular to start with, then the rewriting of history starts. And then everybody seems to forget all the good stuff the president did, all the good stuff that happened over 4 years, and only seems to remember the one or two incidents of bad things. So another case, let me just continue with this, because rewriting history is always fascinating to me. I love history. I teach history. I love reading history. I love learning history. And so when I take a look at history and I take a look at this claim that Trump praised Nazis during a Nazi rally in Charlottesville, this is the big one that left-wing people love to throw out. That Trump is a Nazi because he praised Nazis. He said there are good people on both sides. I heard this for a couple of months. I remember watching the speech, and I remember thinking, well, he didn't actually say that. That's not exactly what he said. And then I looked up the speech, and I realized that there was creative editing done. They cut out the end of the sentence. So he actually said there were good people on both sides. And I'm not talking about the Nazis. I'm actually just talking about the people who got up to protest the removal of the statue. There were good people on the yes side and good people on the no side. I'm definitely not talking about the Nazis. And he made it clear that he wasn't talking about the Nazis. But they cut out that back part of it because that's what media does. Media manipulates audio and video in order to convince you on their narrative. They create the world narrative. Media is very dangerous when it comes to stuff like this. They've been doing this for years. Years ago, I taught a course on media manipulation. I showed videos of how they take different footage and they break up different footage to make it look like a certain story happened when something totally different happened. How they take footage from 5 years ago or pictures from 5 years ago and publish pictures from 5 years ago with different captions to try to sell the idea that that dead baby or that burned up person is something that happened yesterday and not something that happened 6 years ago in a country far, far away. This is stuff the media does all the time. Now, I've worked in media for majority of my life, majority of my adult life, I worked in media. And I saw firsthand the propaganda, how propaganda is perpetrated in the media. I love to tell the story about the first job I was sent out. I was 17 years old or 16 years old. I was sent on my first reporting job. And I had always learned, everyone always told me that, if you're a journalist, you have to be balanced. And I went out and I got both sides. It was a rally. There was an Arab side and a Jewish side, an Israeli side, and they were arguing with each other. And I took quotes from both sides, and I spent hours writing up the story, only for the editor to tell me, no, we only want the Israeli side. Get rid of the other side. The publisher doesn't even want to read it. So media chooses what side of the story they're telling you. That's why you can't trust anything you read. You can't trust anything you hear. Join me in the chat room, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could call me, 301-768-4841. In Israel, you could call 02-650-0151. Love to talk to you. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
And me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman.
I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in 301-768-4841 in North America. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. Love to talk to you. You could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I monitor the chat room the entire show. So if you post up there, I will actually read your posts. It's hard for me to type and answer you during the show, but I'll answer you on the air if there's something I feel that I have to answer. But I'm monitoring the chat room the entire show, and the conversation is always interesting. So it's always fun to read what people are saying in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So we're talking about truth. So the truth is that in a few hours, Joe Biden will be the president of the United States. Kamala Harris will be the vice president of the United States of America. The truth is that for the last 10 years, minimum of 10 years, we've been told that there are no genders, yet people are celebrating the first woman vice president of the United States. I don't get it. We've been told that there's no color, that we should be colorblind, that mentioning someone's color or looking at someone's color is racist. But people are celebrating the first dark-skinned woman vice president. I don't understand why the distinction is made. I don't understand what purpose it is to make the distinction. I don't understand why the Democrats always jump to race and why race is important. Race is the only thing that us as humans can't control. We're born with the color of our skin. We have no control over it. It doesn't define us. In fact, pointing it out or even noticing it or caring about what color anybody's skin is pointless. I don't care what color you are. You could be green, you could be yellow, you could be blue, you could be purple. Doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is, are you a nice person? Are you a good person? Are you a moral person? This is what matters to me, not your skin color. I couldn't care less what color your skin is. And that is the honest truth. And that should be the honest truth for everybody. We should not be focusing on race. Race is irrelevant. We should be focusing on people, on making people better people. This is what our focus in the world should be. Now, some will argue, well, race is an issue because, certain races are a little more oppressed than other races and blah, blah, blah. And I get that. That is because when you feel like a victim, you are a victim. That's one of the aspects of it. But aside from that aspect of if you feel you're a victim, you are a victim, another aspect is that we focus too much on race. So if we focus this much on race, then race is actually an issue. If we stop the focus on race, we stop the focus on gender, and we just look at people, and we focus on people and educating people, and loving our neighbors like we are commanded to in the Bible, and we look at morality and we decide to be moral people, then race and gender don't really matter. What matters is moral character, and that's what should matter. And when you're hiring somebody, it shouldn't matter what color they are. It shouldn't matter what race they are, what gender they are. It should matter how qualified they are. So having quotas to bring in different kinds of people into a company, into a private company, in my opinion, is ridiculous. We should not be doing that. We should be encouraging companies to hire the best people for the position, the most qualified people for the positions, regardless of who they are. So sometimes, because of these quotas that are being imposed on companies, sometimes good employees that could push the company forward, employees that could do great things for the company, are passed over because they have to kind of hire some kind of diversity, some kind of diversity agenda. So skin color or nationality or race or gender is more important than qualification, and that's not the way to run business. I'm sorry. But that all fits into the same category. We're living in this world where we're discounting truth. We're changing truth to match our narrative. We're changing the perception of the world when it comes to qualifications for jobs. We're changing the perception of the world when it comes to admissions into institutes of higher education. We're changing the entire way the world functions to fit a narrative instead of using logical sense, instead of using logical brain power and realizing, as Martin Luther King said, all men are created equal. It's a simple concept. And we just passed Martin Luther King Day just a couple of days ago in the United States. They had Martin Luther King Day. And you have to understand that all men are created equal. This is the quote, and it's the way I've always lived my life. I've never really cared what gender, religion, or race or anything you are. I couldn't care less. My judgment of people has always been: are you a good person or are you a bad person? Are you an honest person or are you a thief? Are you a good person or are you a liar? These are the criteria I use to judge people and to judge, is this the kind of person I want in my life, or is this the kind of person that I want to stay away from? And I think that if we all took a step back from the rhetoric, and the rhetoric that's so divisive in society, the rhetoric that kills us, and if you look at Jewish society, the rhetoric of Orthodox versus secular versus Haredi was, all these divisions. I like to go by the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I'm not a Lubavitcher, but I like to go by the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the late Menachem Mendel Schneerson. where he said there are no religious Jews or non-religious Jews. There's just Jews. And I actually believe that. I mean, I don't care what the division is. I don't care where these arbitrary false lines and false divisions are in society. I don't pay attention to them. And I get into trouble. When I speak like this, I get into trouble. And I know there are people out there who are going to disagree with me, and you can call in if you want. The numbers are there. We have open lines for a reason. This is the reason. If you don't agree with me, you can feel free to call in. Still a few minutes left in the show, so feel free to call in all you want. And I'll be more than happy to talk to you because I think it's an important discussion. So we got to change the way society thinks. We got to change the way we think and the way we look at different people. We have to look at each other equally. There's no reason not to. And dividing society the way we divide society and making the hierarchy in society the way the hierarchy is sort of being divided now is extremely scary. It's not scary because I feel that it's not scary because some of the people on the left are saying that, you're a straight white man, so you're evil. That I don't care about. That's ridiculous. Let them judge me based on my skin color. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's as racist as judging somebody else on their skin color. I made this argument also years ago when Barack Obama was elected. I did a radio show. We were on not on this channel, but we were on the radio for election night, and we spoke to hundreds of people across the United States. And we spoke to them, and I asked them straight out. I said to them, did you vote? Who did you vote for? And most of them admitted that I voted for Barack Obama. And I asked them the same question. Why did you vote for Barack Obama? He's a one-term senator. He has really very little political experience. Why would you vote for the man? And 99% of the people on the show said to me, I voted for Barack Obama because he's black and I want to see the first black president. Wait a second. If you voted for Barack Obama because he was black, does that not make you a racist? Does that make you as racist as not voting for someone because he's black? Or not voting for someone because he's white? Or not voting for someone because he's Jewish? Or not voting for someone because he's Arab? I mean, doesn't that make you the same bigot? It seems odd to me that we could say that society has somehow been brainwashed to believe that voting for someone based on their skin color is acceptable, but not voting for someone based on their skin color is unacceptable. If one is acceptable, then the other has to be acceptable. I personally don't think either is acceptable. That's my opinion. I don't think either is acceptable. We should not be making our judgment based on pigmentation, something we can't control. We should be making our judgments based on moral character, based on experience. But alas, I feel sometimes like I am a lone wolf in the desert, just baying at the moon. Sometimes I feel that way, because when I say these things, I always get knocked. I was thrown off 2 internships while I did my teaching degree because they didn't believe that I was able to teach students when I held points of view such as equality and equity is important. They didn't believe that was a moralistic thing to believe in. That I don't believe in equality. I believe in equity. Everything should be fair for everyone, and that seemed to be a problem for them. So I mean, we're living in a crazy world, and in the crazy world we're living in, we have to accept certain facts, and the certain facts are that the winners write the history, and the winners control the narrative, and we have to be vigilant when we listen to the narrative, when we listen to the media. We have to be vigilant when we read the newspapers and read the websites and watch the news and listen to the commentators. We have to do our own research. We have to watch the raw footage, as much of it as we can, and we have to make our own judgment calls, because we can't believe anybody or what anybody says anymore, including me. And I've said this a million times on the show, and I keep saying it. I tell my students, I tell everybody the same thing. Never believe a word I say. Look it up. Please, do the research. I do my research before I do my show. I do my research before I get into my classes. But I ask you not to believe a word I say ever on this show. Do the research yourself. It's the only way that you can be sure that what you hear is true. I try to speak the truth. People call me out and tell me I don't, but that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'm Howie Summerger's Political Hitman. I'll see you again next week, right here on Israel News Talk Radio.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling for the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.